Can somebody explain to me how this was a good idea?
From the Second World War, who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98. His name is Yaroslav Hunka. And I was going to say he's in the gallery, but I think you beat me to that. But I'm very proud to say that he is from North Bay and from my riding of Nipissing-Temiskaming.
Of course, the reason why this occurred was due to Russian disinformation.
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians. I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine.
That, my friends, was Justin Trudeau. Now, guys, really quick, I don't really do that many foreign policy videos anymore, especially here on this channel, mostly due to the fact that if you talk about the war in Ukraine, the videos typically tend to get a bit of a hit on them. Now, I normally talk about this type of stuff on my channel, Gear Issue 33, which is my second channel, my backup channel, which I'm trying to mold into a bit of a military history channel, which I've already released some additional videos on, but I haven't really released anything on recently. And foreign policy will come up every now and again then to try to give people an idea of what to expect on certain things. But I have not been able to post there for a while. But don't worry, I'll leave a couple of videos in the description box. That way you guys can go check out some of the videos there, and I'll start back posting soon to that channel. Of course, I'm making it a military history and military movies channel, basically is what it is. You know, explaining the history, explaining what's real, what's not, the purpose behind each. But just figure I'd go ahead and get that out of the way because I normally don't do these types of videos on the channel. However, what I do is I call it stupidity. I call out mostly the wokeism crap, the extreme political correctness, and of course I call out all the stupid stuff that's going on. And I try to give people an explanation of what's going on. And the only way I can explain this one is that somebody, and I mean somebody, completely screwed up the vetting process. Or it may be possible that they accidentally, you know, kind of like fed the conspiracy. Well, they're not really conspiracy theories. I mean, I can't really say it without YouTube making this video limited as far as ads is concerned or demonetizing it outright like they did the two videos that I released on Monday, which, by the way, were more sports in nature. But, of course, I had to request reviews. And, of course, the monetization status is back on those videos. So, hey, I won one for a change. Yeah, you guys are seeing this. Many people talk about a certain unit that's serving in Ukraine, fighting with Ukraine, but yet Russia has this massive history, even though they were communist at one point in time. They were heavily communist at one point in time, but apparently they're anti-Nazi, but yet at the same time, there's this group that has a certain ideology that is very, very close to that, actually is the latter, what I just said, that is fighting on behalf of Ukraine, and you thought that it was a good idea to bring in a 98-year-old World War II vet, give him applause, which, by the way, we love our World War II vets. Obviously, we love our vets. We should be giving our vets applause. However, the problem is this right here. This particular guy was fighting for the wrong side.
The Second World War, who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Invited by House Speaker Anthony Rota to witness Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's address to Parliament, Yaroslav Hunka is one of his constituents.
He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service.
That was the jubilant scene Friday. Now new details have emerged about that war service MPs applauded. Hunka served in the 1st Galician Division, a voluntary unit commanded by the Nazis.
The unit is complicit in the Holocaust.
This Jewish human rights campaigner says there's no defending former soldiers like Hunka.
You swore allegiance to Hitler, and you were involved with the massacre of civilians. So it doesn't matter if you try and claim that you were defending against communism, you were still involved with the Nazi war machine.
The division's history is murky. Its volunteers united by a desire to take on the Soviet Union, says this academic.
For them, the ultimate evil was Moscow occupation.
Rhoda has now apologized and says he regrets ever inviting him. I recognize an individual in the gallery. I have subsequently become aware of more information which causes me to regret my decision to do so, he says in a statement. I accept full responsibility for my actions. Still, the opposition is asking how this could happen. The Prime Minister's office says it wasn't aware the Speaker had invited Hunka, saying in a statement, no advance notice was provided to the Prime Minister's office, nor the Ukrainian delegation, about the invitation or the recognition.
And JP, you've been trying to reach Yaroslav Hunka.
Yeah, Ian, we've asked Yaroslav Hunka and his family to comment. There's been no response. He's defended, though, his war service in the past, calling it a fight for Ukrainian independence. Regardless, Russian propaganda...
You just saw a news report on this right here, and obviously this right here is not going over very well. This was obviously pretty dumb, pretty stupid, but then again, though, like I said before, it's also possible that maybe they're just doing, whatever, and quite frankly, don't really care. I've been thinking that there's the case with the modern left, and I also find it funny, especially given the fact that Justin Trudeau and pretty much all of the Canadian Parliament, or at least all of the leadership that's on the left in the nation to our north, called those truckers, the ones who were protesting the Poke, they called them Nazis. Somehow or another, Confederate flags got in that protest. I think that's a government plant. I don't care what anybody says. But yet somehow they were all Nazis. But yet here you are, have a literal old school Nazi who fought for the Nazis during World War II against the Russians, who, by the way, obviously the Russians under Stalin were not exactly what we call good either. But you can't blame a nation for defending its homeland. And, of course, we're going to be talking a lot about the Eastern European campaign during World War II, because that right there is where the vast majority of the atrocities occurred. Now, before we get to that, guys, and like I said before, if this right here is just stupid, how dumb can you be? I mean, I'm going to go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt and say that these people were just quite frankly dumb. Also, something else, too, when they stood up and applauded, they were forced to applaud, and it seems like nobody wanted to stop the applause. Very, very reminiscent, speaking of the Soviet Union, very, very reminiscent of that time that Joseph Stalin gave a speech and nobody wanted to stop clapping because everybody was scared that if they stopped, Stalin would actually have them put away. Now, before I go any further, before we talk about Eastern Europe and why this entire thing looks totally stupid, we got to talk about the veteran himself, and we talk about that in this video as well, because apparently, let me just put it like this right here. Anytime you go through our system to try to get any military records, of course, records of anybody who may have served in World War II, a family member, if you've ever done this before and you kind of know where I'm going with this, please leave a comment in the comment section, because it's really a pain to do so, because finding records that old, like I said, it can be a bit of a pain, and even getting a hold of one's relatives' medals, ribbons, certifications, anything like that, getting at least some type of copy of it or whatnot, it can really and truly be a bit of a nightmare. So just go ahead and know that now. It's not the way it was when I got out in 2007. We got our medals and stuff typically right after the first deployment. Actually, we got ours right before we came home from the first deployment, and then, of course, as you go through your time in the military, you gain ribbons, you gain certain awards, and of course, when you rate them, you can officially adorn them on your uniform and take them home with you. I'm not going to go through my military record or anything like that. Nobody online should do that. It's just my personal feeling on this, unless you're some type of special forces badass. But the fact of the matter is this right here. This right here is such an extremely stupid, cringy, horrible look that it's baffling that anybody could be this dumb. But then again, though, it is Justin Trudeau. Podcast of the Lotus Eaters had a very good take on this. I'm going to play a minute of this, and then I'm going to come back on the other side, talk some more about the Eastern Front during World War II, and then, of course, the actual information on the vet himself, the old school Waffen SS member who has been identified, and of course some of the information has been found on him. The more and more you look into this, the more and more you see exactly how bad this is.
Nazis are the bad guys, which is why you can't get into a debate with most people who are a bit low IQ, but who've nevertheless gone through the educational process without them calling you a Nazi fairly swiftly into
It's Godwin's law, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And the SS, of course, were as you say, they are the spear tip of the bad. They were involved in things like massacre of civilians and war crimes against prisoners of war. So they were famous for not taking the Geneva Convention seriously when they captured anyone. Small matter of genocide, they did that. So they played a significant role in the Holocaust. Atrocities in Eastern Europe, mass killings, brutality against civilian population, wiping out villages, all that kind of stuff. Ethnic cleansing, forced deportations. In fact, it got so bad with those particular chaps that after the war, the Nuremberg trials, they got together and at an international military tribunal, they decided that they were a criminal organisation and proceeded on sort of tracking them down, those who hadn't been apprehended.
Let's talk about that Eastern Front really quick. And by the way, I want you to know right now that I have... Dude, if you really and truly want to look into World War II, I advise you guys to do. So there are a lot of things that oftentimes does not come up. We oftentimes don't talk about the Spanish Civil War, which occurred in the 1930s. Somehow or another, the Winter War that occurred between the Soviet Union and Finland. Yes, there was an actual war between the Soviet Union and Finland, and for the most part, while it goes in the history books as a Soviet win, if you actually look at the casualty count, you would probably walk away thinking that it was a win by the Finns. Yeah, that's exactly how inept Stalin was. You never attack a country that is north to you that has a very, very small corridor for you to go through. Next thing you know, actually going through there can be a bit of a nightmare. It's something that Ukraine was experiencing when they considered going with a counteroffensive to the Crimea during the Ukraine war that's going on with Russia. Like I said before, you really and truly can't go too far into that. And I made my opinions very clear, and quite frankly, they've never changed. Just two turds fighting to be king turd on top of crap mountain. Back to the Eastern Front of World War II. So obviously, most of you guys may know this. 1941, it's June. Adolf Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa. He gets all the way to Moscow. He falls short. We're not going to go fully into detail because obviously, as somebody who does do military history from time to time, you can obviously point out some very, very big-time fallacies. There are other channels, by the way, that do handle this issue a lot better than myself, at least as far as like at this moment in time. If you guys are interested, I think the Great War series of the guys who did the Great War, Indy and Idell, and those guys who, by the way, are now doing a series called World War II. Jesse Alexander does the Great War series now, but it's still pretty good. Those guys are pretty good. Teak History is another good one. Potential History is another good one. Mark Fiegel Productions, Mark Fenton Productions. He is pretty good as well. A lot of those guys are definitely a lot better than me and more capable at this moment in time, but don't worry. As I continue this venture, of course, obviously you'll see some improvements, but still that is yet to come years down the road. The thing that you have to understand about the Eastern Front is that this right here was the most intense fighting that occurred. After Operation Barbarossa had pretty much stalled out, had pretty much failed, Stalin goes on the counteroffensive. You got to understand, to the Russians, this was a patriotic war because a lot like in Napoleon's failed venture into Russia, they view this as, hey, look, you just attacked the motherland. And of course, if the same thing happened here, if you attack the United States, I mean, obviously we're going to fight back 10 times harder. This is our country. This is our home. These are our people. Well, obviously, the Nazis, they felt to continue to wage their war on a certain ethnic group that has a J in their name, which, by the way, if you even mention it on this platform, you'll probably get demonetized because the ADL, quite frankly, is up everybody's rear right now. I probably just got demonetized saying that too. Still at the same time, though, I'm pretty sure you guys know what I mean. So obviously, in the areas right around Ukraine, especially after Stalingrad, when Hitler lost Stalingrad, when the Russians went back on the counteroffensive, what do you think the Nazis did? They took more prisoners. They took more political prisoners. They executed more of them. And, of course, a lot of them had J's in their ethnic group, okay? That's that word, that little letter. And something else, too, that a lot of people oftentimes fail to mention is the vast majority of the extermination camps, the vast majority of the concentration camps. You're talking about Dachau, Plasla, you're talking about Treblinka, you're talking about Auschwitz. The vast majority of them were in Poland, Eastern Europe, all those places. And there was a lot of hardcore, intense fighting, but there was also a lot of executions. And there were a lot of people that were killed that, quite frankly, did not need to be killed. I mean, people were dying left and right during World War II, and the Eastern Front, as I mentioned before, quite frankly, was the most intense of the most intense fighting of the entire war. Now, when you actually begin to look into this person's background, you guys will probably start to see a bit of a trend here, especially given the fact that seeing how he is a veteran of the Eastern Front of World War II, and he is a member of the Waffen SS, the SS, by the way, committed probably the most amount of those executions. Let's go ahead and roll this. I'll come back on the other side. I'm pretty sure by the time you guys hear this, you guys will fully get the gist.
In this thread points out was operating in Ukraine, where there are numerous reports of villages being burned and civilian populations being wiped out, including one particularly prominent case, which was a Polish town being wiped out, over 1,000 civilians killed. So,
right.
yeah.
So if he was the paper boy,
That's
wasn't
yes,
the least
that's
incriminating
not good.
of places.
And as Bo points out, I mean, a lot of this is obscured by the sort of fog of history. But if you were in the SS on the Eastern Front during the late stages of the war, you could not be involved in the Holocaust.
Sorry, it's quite absurd. Like the fog of history. Oh, okay. How unclear is it? Well, you were in the SS.
Yes. I mean, normally the conversation would end at that point.
Yeah.
Normally we wouldn't get further than that.
Yeah.
And this thread goes on to point out that in this particular guy's case, Hunker, so at the end of the war in 1945, he surrendered to British forces in Italy. He was held as a prisoner of war until 1947. After that, him and some other SS members resettled in Canada, because they've always had a very progressive immigration policy and continue to this day.
Not Argentina. That's surprising.
No, you presumably had to be a higher rank,
right,
to get the invite there. Now he did come under the guy who was applauded in the Parliament. He did come under investigation for war crimes. In fact, a whole bunch of his unit were, and some of them got prosecuted for war crimes, but he individually wasn't because of a lack of evidence in his particular case.
He was probably innocent then. Yeah, he probably did nothing.
Yes.
Wrong.
Yeah, I mean, apart from
apart from being
that small
literally
matter,
being in the SS.
Again, can I just point out that
Yes.
Russell Brand, again, no matter what you think about the man's character, the veracity of said allegations, he's not had it presented in a court of law. There's zero evidence, but he's had his entire livelihood taken away and hounded by all of British media and the government. Well, government committees that aren't the actual government, whatever. This guy just got a standing ovation in the Parliament for maybe.
This right here is what they brought into their Parliament. They brought somebody into their Parliament who just may have war crimes under his belt. Now, let me go ahead and say this. I don't typically say war crimes very often. And the real reason why I don't say war crimes very often is because to the common, ordinary leftist, somebody like myself who did 2 tours overseas in Iraq is going to be viewed as a war criminal. This is just who these people are. These people are fascinating in the way their brains operate. Don't worry, we'll be talking more about that in video number 2 because apparently these leftists went absolutely bonkers, went absolutely crazy over an ad, a McDonald's ad from Japan. We'll talk more about that in the second video. The thing is this right here. Men obviously at war are going to do certain things. However, in the sense of World War II or the case of World War II, especially on the Eastern Front, a lot of atrocities were committed. The SS was involved in just about every single one of them. And I can already hear somebody come here try to have like a bit of a neutral take on this, but the fact of the matter is this right here, dude. It's likely that you may have actively taken part in the Holocaust. This is never a good look. And even if said he is as innocent as he could be, people are automatically going to assume that he's guilty by association. Yes, people oftentimes throw me in the same loop because I've fought in Iraq. And the thing that you have to understand is this right here. If a group of people who constantly call people who disagree with them Nazis, mostly due to the fact that they want to slander and character assassinate them, and this is quite frankly how they are when it comes to debate. One of the main reasons why I don't do debates is because these people are an absolute nightmare to talk to because it just boils down to an argument. And they go out of their way to absolutely make your day a living hell because quite frankly, leftists are just not happy people. Let me get back on topic. Fact of the matter is this right here. You have been calling people Nazis the entire time that you have been in office. You've been calling people who oppose you Nazis. But then you turn right back around and bring a literal Nazi into Parliament. Almost like it's an exclamation point to what a lot of people are already saying and what a lot of people already know about Ukraine and their fight against Russia, the bad man Putin. I mean, it's almost like people are kind of looking at this and they see this right here, and maybe it may have been a slip of the tongue, but even if it was a slip of the tongue, it was accidental, and these people really and truly screwed up the vetting process here, which I highly doubt. I find almost completely unbelievable it's still a god-awful look. It makes you wonder exactly what our neighbors to the north are really and truly up to. Not Canadian people, not Canadian voters. I'm talking about the leadership. A leadership that, by the way, pushes crap, woke nonsense like crazy, extreme political correctness. I mean, hell, they have assisted self-deletion right now to where you can actually walk in there and self-delete basically it's not against the law to do so. As a matter of fact, I did a couple of videos on this prior on how it was that they offered a veteran, someone who'd actually done time in the Canadian military, they offered them self-deletion instead of health care. That's what Canada, quite frankly, has devolved to. So it makes you almost wonder exactly what they're up to in the great land of the North. Bro, like I said, I mean, it's one thing to bring in somebody who disagrees with you. It's one thing to bring in somebody who may be a little bit liberal, but you're bringing in an actual literal World War II vet who, by the way, is a Nazi and 98 years old. Meanwhile, Ukraine has this history of a certain battalion and a certain unit that's actually helping them fight Russia on their behalf, a unit that Vladimir Putin uses as far as Russian propaganda. If you guys caught the very last part there, if I didn't actually include it in that second clip, the Russians are using this like crazy. They're using this as propaganda against the West. You see, they like Nazis. You see, they honor Nazis. Fact of the matter is, Justin Trudeau is an absolute embarrassment of a person, an absolute embarrassment of a human being, is an absolute embarrassment of a leader. But then again, though, what the hell do you expect out of Fidel Castro's illegitimate son? With that right there being said, guys, make sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I would love to get you guys' thoughts on this. Please hit the notifications bell. Share the video. Send it out. Pass it around to friends. And I'll see you guys later.